I'd say pick happy over normal 10 times out of 10. I need something that has purpose. For me, I've just realized that helping other human beings, it feels like it fulfills that purpose. And I started looking around and I'm like, do I really need more stuff to walk past? Like, what is my goal in life? Is it to just accumulate as much shit as I can so that I can walk past a bunch of really cool stuff? Because that's all I do. All of the systems that we have in modern culture were not meant to help you find your individualism, right? Like school, for all of it, the good things it's done for a lot of people, it creates really obedient machines because society, in order to move forward, needs cogs. Right? And so school trains you to be a cog in that machine. What's interesting is all of the people that somehow step outside of that machine, the Steve Jobs of the world, they're the ones that end up building the machine for everybody else to follow.
Yeah. You are listening to the Optimal Performance Podcast. The OPP is brought to you by Natural Stacks, makers of 100% natural and open source supplements designed to help you live optimal.
Ryan Muncie is probably the smartest guy I know.
Trust me, Muncie is the nutrition guy.
Ryan Muncie's out there trying to make the world better for all of us.
The Optimal Performance Podcast is bold, edgy, creative, entertaining, and epic.
Ryan Muncie is my go-to guy.
Ryan Muncie he's the first guy I call.
He's making people's lives better. Ryan Muncie's an innovator.
All right, this week on the OPP, we were talking to my friend, Rick Alexander. Rick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Rick, we can go a lot of different ways with your bio. Sure. I'm going to steal what your Instagram account says, human potential junkie.
Yeah, I like that. I was actually thinking about changing that, but I like it.
Yeah? If you change it, what would you change it to?
I think a human movement advocate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. Anything else you want to add to that bio for our listeners?
No. I think that tells the story, right?
Okay.
I think that is a collective of all kinds of different experiences that I've had between being in the military. I was just thinking about it in the last month a lot. Everything I've done up until now, the supplement companies, the podcast that I have, the book that I'm writing, at the end of the day, those are all just different outlets for me to express the fact that I'm an advocate for human movement and the power that actually brings. And so I think it sums it up well.
Okay. I would agree with that. I like that. But I'm glad you mentioned a couple of things in there. So you are currently active military. You'll be finished in a few months. You've got history with running your own supplement company. You have a podcast. You have a book coming out.
Yep.
Long history in health and some really, really cool feats of human performance. So we'll touch on a lot of this stuff. The podcast, by the way, Lionheart Radio, Amazing show. You have some great guests on there. So if you guys are looking for a second podcast to listen to in your rotation, go check out Lionheart Radio.
And you were one of them. You were one of those guests.
I was one of the guests, yeah. So I want to start with something called choice architecture.
Okay.
You have embodied this, and we've talked about some of the ways that you've done this in your past, and you continue to do it in your daily routine now. For our listeners, if you guys are not familiar with this, choice architecture is a really cool behavioral concept. It's actually used a lot in marketing. People that make money selling you things understand that, if you go to a used car lot or even a new car dealership, they show you the highest model first, like the top of the line with all the bells and whistles, and then it makes you less likely to want the one that has, cloth seats instead of leather seats.
Right.
Or if you walk into Best Buy, they have the biggest TVs up front and then the smaller ones are in the back. So there have been some studies where behaviorists changed the order in which food was presented in a cafeteria. And by putting healthier food first, people actually ate healthier and chose healthier options. So with that being kind of said and explained, I want to get you to tell our listeners some of the ways that you've built this in either consciously or subconsciously, whether you knew it was a thing or not.
Yeah.
How are you creating better defaults for yourself to make decisions that are in line with your long-term goals,
right,
no matter how you feel in any given moment?
Right. Yeah, I'm smiling a little bit because, self-realization has to be the first part of that. So you need to understand the kind of person you are to understand, and honestly, you need to put yourself in situations to figure out the kind of choices that you have a natural inclination to make, because that's going to be the first thing. Because, maybe you're the kind of person that chooses depending on your past, your worldview, how you were brought up, maybe you're the person that chooses the healthy option first anyway, right? So that's not something you need to change. I'm not, right? I was given ice cream every night before I went to bed. So I had to understand that about myself, that I have this inclination, almost self-destructive way of eating, right? So you have to start with that in order to change your relationship with food. That would be the first thing I would say.
Well, and it doesn't have to just be in the food realm. That's just the way the researchers studied it in that particular case. But, and a little bit of background for our listeners, you are involved in a lot of, and we'll talk about some of your projects that you have coming up, but you love endurance stuff. You've done some 12-hour things. You've done some 100-mile things. You recently just did 205 miles in 76 hours at Tahoe. You're wearing the Tahoe Endurance hoodie right now.
I don't think I've taken it off since I finished.
I wouldn't either. I would live in it. I'd sleep in it. I'd wear it every day. But I mean, that has to be something that comes into play, whether it's training for an event like that or finishing an event like that.
Yeah. You know what? My mindset on this has evolved. And I think, there's certain things in life that will get you to a point. And then in order to get further, it's kind of like what got you here won't get you there, that mentality. So when you get to a certain point, you realize, okay, I really need to open up my aperture in order to get where I want to get, right? But the first thing I think that I credit, a lot of my success, and honestly, when you're going through my bio, there's a lot of failures in there, right? I don't publicize those, but it's important to know.
Right.
But early on in my career, especially going through like a military special forces selection, one of the things that served me was to take failure off of the table. So I'm of the mindset that willpower is overrated, and I'm sure you've heard that before.
Right.
It's a waste of bandwidth, in my opinion. Anybody that's done the ketogenic diet can attest to the fact that the worst way you could go about that is to buy sugar and keep it in your house, right?
Right.
I mean, that's a recipe for failure all day long.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that as an example, because when I first read about choice architecture, that was the exact scenario where I had been using it, because I've been helping people with nutrition for over a decade now, and I've always told them, you can't eat what you don't have.
Right.
So if you want to eat healthy and you don't buy healthy food, there's zero chance you're going to cook it and eat it.
Right.
And if you don't buy Oreos or ice cream and keep them in your house, the odds of you eating them when willpower is low significantly decrease.
That's
like
right.
if you buy it and you bring it in your home, what do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
Who's going to eat it?
And here's the thing, even if you get away with it and you don't eat it, how much bandwidth did you waste?
Right.
I mean, you hear about, Obama had like the same suit that he would wear every single day. Steve Jobs, he always wore that stupid ass turtleneck because he wanted to free up that bandwidth.
He wasted zero effort mentally on what he was going to wear each day.
That's
Same
right.
thing.
Yeah.
You know?
So sugar and cocaine, get it out of your life, right? And because that addiction is so strong, it's going to help you if you just remove it from your life. So, and I'll give you an example of a way that plays out. So when I was going through a selection process, we used to have what was called the brick tread. And I've told you this story before. And basically what happens is you treaded water in the pool. You had a face mask that was full of water. So you couldn't breathe through your nose. If you started sucking through your nose, obviously you kind of felt like that drowning sensation.
Right.
And you had to scissor kick with both feet. You weren't allowed to do the egg beater, which is advantageous, obviously, when you were treading water. And you had to wear boots, combat boots, with full camis on. And what would happen is the instructor would tell you, right arm out of the water, and then you would keep treading. And you'd have a brick in your hand. And then you'd say left arm out of the water, and then you'd have the brick in the other hand. And then they would say hand with the brick out of the water. Well, when you're going through this, it feels like chaos, right? I mean, you can't see.
And you're not the only one in the water.
No, I'm sorry. So
there's a lot of stuff happening.
Yeah, so people are quitting all around me. I mean, we lost a lot of people that day, right? Lost a lot of good men out there. And so people are quitting like left and right, and you don't know what the hell is happening. Instructors are yelling from all angles, and people are quitting. It just sounds like chaos. Now that I've been an instructor, I realize the control behind the whole thing.
Right.
Really, it's not nearly as chaotic as they make it seem, but that's for a reason, right?
Right.
And when I was going through that, for me, the water was the hardest part of training, right? So there's always going to be something that gets you when you go through a selection process like that. Maybe for me, I was a good runner, but if it came to the water, that was like what was hard for me. Well, I had to get to a point in that process where I'm struggling to breathe. I'm not good in the water as it is, and I'm not comfortable in the water because I didn't grow up swimming. And I remember having this inflection point where I was like, this is it, man. You need to quit right now. But I took that off of the table. So for me, it was like there was no option. It was go down with this ship. It was like kick until there's no more kick left in you.
Right.
And then I kind of had to make the decision like, well, I guess I'm going to go down with the ship. And I made that decision because in that point, up until then, I had taken quit off the table. Through everything we did in training, it was never going to be an option.
Right. And you mentioned that we've had this conversation before, and that's why I wanted to kind of lead with this to sort of give our listeners some insight into how you've there's another way that this is described. It's actually called a Ulysses Pact. And that's basically from Odysseus in the Iliad, where he had his men. He lashed himself to the mast, and as they went past the sirens, he had his men put beeswax in their ears so they couldn't hear the songs. He told them not to untie them until they were past the potential threat.
Okay.
So you told me that you made that deal with yourself on day one, long before you were ever in that environment.
Right.
So when that moment hit, your options weren't, like, quitting wasn't even one of the options in your head. You didn't actually have to think that through in that chaotic moment. Right. And I think that's the important thing, is that, and that's what choice architecture is, or creating better defaults. It's making that pact with yourself so that, you make it in a moment of strength, so that in a moment of weakness, your choices are better.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. When you wake up in the morning, most people don't decide, do I want to brush my teeth or not, right?
Right.
Not brushing your teeth is never an option. You brush your teeth when you leave the house, right?
Right.
And I think if something's truly important to you and you want to get somewhere in life, you need to figure out what it is. It's the milestones that are going to be important to getting you there, and you need to make that pact with yourself.
So how did you use this with the Tahoe 205 miles? Because, we talked about, the stress fractures, the lost toenails, the skin coming off your feet weeks later. Like, there had to have been many moments during that. You even said you had some pulmonary issues.
I did, yeah. So I got high altitude pulmonary edema around mile 80. So from mile 70 to up to 103 was climbing. So it was just almost all uphill except for about 2 miles. And I developed some cardiorespiratory fluid, and I couldn't lay down. Felt like I was drowning. And it was weird for me because obviously, I ran 10 ultras in the last year. So cardio, baseline, aerobic conditioning's never been an issue for me. And it was weird because I was put in this position where I struggled to breathe really hard. If I were to actually put out, I could only go about 10 feet before I had to stop and be doubled over.
Wow.
Trying to breathe. And so for someone like me that hasn't been like that since I was a kid,
right.
You know what I mean? That was something that was really difficult to breathe. And this is where I was talking about kind of what got you here won't get you there. Mm-hmm. I wasn't going to quit. Of course, quitting was never an option for me. I had raised a lot of money for the Heroes Project before I did this run, and I couldn't.
Well, and that's another way to sort of elevate your game and make sure that you can bust through your own plateaus. Is like, if you weren't doing it for the people, that was a fundraiser for heroes and for veterans,
right?
So without them being, your motivator, I'm not saying you, but people, the universal you,
right.
We'll let ourselves down before we let other people down.
For sure. Yeah,
right.
For sure. And that's the thing. It's like when you go work out by yourself, are you going to do that last rep? Maybe. Depends on what's on the line.
Right.
When you take $3,000+ from your friends and family for a cause you believe in, quitting was never
right.
put on that table.
Right.
But then the other thing that I've found to be extremely important is creating a positive counterfact in your life, in your head.
Yeah.
Familiar with what that is?
Like go to your happy place, kind of.
Kind of, yeah. So I think the best way I've heard it explained is a bank robbery. So if you're in a bank and there's 50 people in this bank, and a masked robber comes in, he holds up the bank and he fires one shot, and that shot hits you in the arm, right? There's a couple kinds. The pessimistic person is going to say, could have been any bank, could have been any person, it could have been any arm. There's 100 arms in there, and I happen to be the guy that got hit, right? You have that negative counterfact.
Right.
When the reality is that round could have been a foot to the left or right, a couple inches one way or the other, mm-hmm. and maybe you're not here anymore, right? How lucky am I that it hit me in the arm and nowhere vital?
Right.
That's a positive counterfact. And so I like the "this is good because" statement. This is something I really practice a lot, and it sounds a little bit maybe esoteric or maybe a little too self-helpy, but man, it's gotten me through some really tough times. So whenever you get a difficult situation, you say this is good because, and then you actually search for the reason that is actually good in your life, right? The reason that might help you.
Right.
And so for me, I developed this high altitude pulmonary edema. I found out later 5 or 6 people actually got pulled from the race and had to go to the hospital from edema. I'm a medic in the military. I knew if I talked to a medic, they were going to pull me right away. Right. So when I got to aid stations, I stayed the hell away from them. Yeah. And I couldn't lay down because it felt like I was drowning. So it's like, oh, sleep's out the window too.
Right.
But when I got that, I was faced with this thing that, like I said, I haven't had to deal with. That was never part of the game plan. I planned a million different scenarios and how this race was going to go, and being out of breath was never one of them, right? I thought, right? I mean, I've done so many of these.
And I guess just to catch people up who may not be familiar with this particular event, the altitude goes from basically sea level to like 14,000?
No, it's not. It's actually like 5,000 it starts.
Oh, okay.
And it goes up to like almost 10,000.
I'm thinking of Badlands.
Yeah, but when you're training in Virginia Beach and you don't have a hill,
right,
and you haven't seen altitude, like 5,000 matters.
Our elevation here is like 7 feet.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And so every time I'd go up above 7,500 feet, lungs would fill with fluid instantly, couldn't breathe, had to slow way down.
So you can't breathe, you can't lay down, you can't talk to the medics, you're not sleeping.
That's right. And you know what I thought is, this is good, because now I have to slow down. It's going to force me. I'm going to have my legs later on in the race when my lungs clear up. Whereas maybe if I would have stuck to my game plan, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Right. I'm a firm believer of that.
Right.
I had a game plan. I had thought it through every scenario I possibly could have going into this race to set myself up for success. And then all of a sudden I'm faced with a damn scenario I just did not plan for. And all I could think of is, well, this is good because it's going to save my legs for later on in the race. Right. And so I had to slow down off my pace. My goal was to finish under 72 hours. By mile 103, I realized I had to slow down so much that was probably not going to happen. Right. And sure enough, going into the last 40 miles, my lungs had cleared up. I had spent a lot of time at a lower altitude. Okay. And I had my legs. And I passed lots and lots of people on those final climbs.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So you mentioned before trying to find those moments where you realize that the person you are is not the person you need to be to continue to make progress in your life. And I think the way you phrased it was to realize that you need to open that aperture more. I love that. I think that's such a powerful piece of advice. How do you know when it's time to open that aperture? Because not every time will it be an experience where you have, a pulmonary issue from elevation.
Yeah. You want me to tell you how I do it or how I think people should do it?
Let's do both.
Yeah. I think personally a lot of people don't take an unbiased look at themselves. Right. It's a really hard thing to do. I mean, I have trouble with it. How many times do you step back and look in the mirror and honestly assess the skills that you have, right?
Right.
For me, what I've found, because it's hard to know what you don't have, right?
Mm-hmm. You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. Right. So the way that I go about it is I take on projects and events that are way too big for me. Before I had ever finished a 100-mile race, I signed up for this 200-miler. And what happens is if you're honest with yourself and you really want to achieve this thing, you're going to have to level up in order to do so. And by taking that unbiased look, you canvas the skills that you have and that you don't have. And that's the way that you do it. And that's the way that I figured out how to level up. I mean, the first, I signed up for a 100-miler without ever training for it at all. And I thought I could just do it because that's kind of how my life has been. And I went out there and I literally didn't make it. I didn't quit, but I got pulled at mile 70 because I didn't make the time cutoff. Okay. Right? And man, I was pissed. And I had a couple days where I was really down on myself for feeling like a failure. And as soon as I kind of got out of my own head, I signed up for a 200-miler. And that caused me throughout that year to level up in a way that I've never leveled up in my life. And I don't have a runner's body. We're doing this on audio, so maybe everyone won't see it, but right. I weighed about 230 pounds at 5'10" when I signed up for this 200-miler.
Yeah, and how much did you weigh when you actually did it?
I was down to 209.
Okay.
And I was at 192 when I finished.
Wow.
Yeah, I lost 18 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
I saw the picture afterwards. I mean, you looked like you needed a good meal and like 3 days of sleep.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly what I needed.
You mentioned that you've had some failures in your life. What's maybe the biggest failure
That I've had?
Yeah, that you could talk about?
Yeah, sure. The biggest failure that I've had, I've had some personal failures, but we'll go with a good professional one. I started a clothing company when I knew that I wanted to run my own business, and I knew that I wanted to work in fitness. Because like I said, I think all these things I've done have just been an expression of me being an advocate of human movement. And so I wanted to work in the fitness company. So I thought, I'll start a fitness apparel company. Not realizing that I was going to end up in the textile industry.
Right.
And style and design is something I've never been good at. And I struggled hard, you know, and you know when you're not working within something that really resonates with you, because everything is a struggle.
Right.
And you start never being excited about things, right? And I joined up with a guy that wasn't a great partner for me at the time, and it was my first time trying to partner on a business venture. And I lost a ton of money. I mean, a ton of money for me at the time. It was like $25,000 probably. And I just got to a point maybe a year later where I was like, and this was the first time I'd ever failed. And I was like, at least in recent memory. And because I went to the military, a lot of people thought I wouldn't make it through selection. And I crushed it, in my own opinion. But I made it. Right. And so I was like, damn, like I just have told everybody about this company. Like I have to tell them that I'm quitting, that I'm failing, that I'm closing it down. Because I got to a point where I thought I have no honest way of going forward with this in any way that looks like a success to me.
Right.
You know what I did though, I'm a huge fan of reframing failure as learning. And I had to fail in order to learn that, right? Like I had to learn, like you're not going to run a 100-miler without training for it. At least I'm not, right? I think some people probably could, but I wasn't one of them. Every business you run it's not gonna work. You have to inventory what happened. You have to figure out what went right, what went wrong. You know, I think a lot of times in life people don't sit back and actually reflect on the process. They just try to move on to the next thing in order to avoid the pain and avoid the hurt and all the things that come with a negative, come with a failure. And I think it's super important that you go through that process and you really like look back and reflect on what you learned so that you can double down and you can be in your next effort, you'll be successful, right? Right. And if you don't, you do it again, you know?
I mean, you strike me as a guy, and I mean, I follow you on social media. We talk quite frequently. I know you stay moving. You have a lot of projects.
Yes.
How do you build the time in to have that quiet and that reflection?
Meditation, truly. And that's another thing. It's like I had to evolve in my thinking. Like if you'd have come to me right as after my first couple deployments and you were like, listen, man, meditation's going to be something that you need to put in your life. Right. You know, I'd have been like, no. Right. To put politically correct, I would have said no. Right. But I've just realized like you need to get space between your actions and your thoughts. You have to build that space in there. And for me, that's been meditation. And truthfully, long distance running, ultra marathons, for me, that's the most extreme form of meditation there is.
Yeah, you said that you learned a lot about yourself at the Tahoe race. What did you learn, other than how much the pulmonary issues sucked?
So, something that's interesting is I'm the kind of guy like, see a wall, run through the wall. That's been my mentality forever. Like I said in school, it was like, you don't quit. You could go down with the ship if that's what you have to do, but you keep moving forward. Right. Of course, in Tahoe, I wasn't going to quit, but I had to get to a point where I had to evolve to that mindset piece that I talked about earlier, which is why every time anyone asks me about it, I'm super excited to talk about that this is good because statement. Right. Because I really learned in that moment the power of just positive thinking.
That was my elbow, by the way. I'm not sure if we'll be able to edit that sound out, but that was my elbow. How many mental reps did it take you to get to a point where amid mental turmoil, you could use that "this is good because" statement? You want
to hear another story?
Sure.
All right. No, I'm a huge fan of testing yourself. I think the more adversity that you can build into your life, the better off you're going to be when it comes through the real situation, when you're put in a situation that you're not equipped for. Before I went on my first deployment, one of the most I don't want to talk too much about the military, but before I went on my first deployment, my boss said to me, he was like, whatever we do up until now is all you're going to have with you. So the amount of preparation that you have is all that you'll be able to take with you when you get in an adverse situation. Mm-hmm. So I took that as like, okay, well, I need to put myself in as many adverse situations as possible so that I'm capable of dealing with them.
So first of all, I love that. And I think that that's an approach that everyone should take to all of their training, whether you're training to be the best salesman at your business, whether you're training to be a professional or Olympic athlete, mm-hmm. or whatever your training is. Training is designed to prepare you for competition, whatever that real world application is for mm-hmm. that thing. And I think a lot of people don't really take that approach to training. But do you think a lot of your colleagues viewed training the same way, or do you think you were unique in that way?
I take a lot of time and reflect on the process, like I said. Right. When I was in Africa on my fourth deployment, I was about to fall asleep, and a girl started pounding on my door, and I was a medic. And so she came in, and she was like, listen, you need to go out there. And she was making no sense. She's like, you need to go out there. I'm wearing my pajamas, so I grabbed my med bag. All I got from her was there was some kind of an emergency. I get in the truck with another medic and a host nation guy, an African guy. And we drive out to where we think the landing strip is, because apparently they think a plane had crashed. We get to the landing strip, and they're like, it's not here. You got to go further. And so then we go further, and we're driving further. We get to where we think it is again, and they're like, you got to go into the trails. So then we get to the point with the truck where we can no longer drive. And this is Africa like you're thinking, the jungle, right? And so we get out of this truck, and we start moving through the woods in the direction that we think this plane crashed. Mind you, I'm in my pajamas, and I've grabbed my med bag, and that is all that I'm equipped with. And then all the training I'd done before that.
Right.
And I'm with a host nation guy and this girl who's also a Navy corpsman. And we end up getting to the point where we have to low crawl through the jungle because it's too thick to walk. And all I've got with me is a radio, and there's a plane flying overhead. And he's like, I'm going to vector you in because you have no navigation equipment. There's no way to tell how we're going to get to where we need to get. And so we're crawling.
You're literally crawling blind, and somebody flying overhead is telling you turn left, turn right, go straight.
That's right. But he can't tell us because he can't see us. So he would just over one way, and I'd look up, and I'm like, okay, and I'd go left. And then he'd cruise over the other way. And then, and you're like just crawling like a snake in the friggin' jungle. And it was so thick that all the barbs are kind of like cutting me up. I'm wearing pajamas. I'm completely exposed. My med bag gets torn wide open. And after about an hour of that, it's completely dark. When you're in Africa, you see wild animals. So leading up to that, we had seen lions. We had seen all these things, right? Well, after about an hour of that, we started realizing, like, we are in a hopeless situation. Like, it starts feeling hopeless, right? Like, we're crawling deeper into the jungle. There's no way of telling where. We have no tracking, no navigation equipment. All we have is this plane flying overhead, which seems to be flying in different damn directions every time we look up. And after 1 hour, it kind of started sinking in. Like, this is kind of a bad situation. And after 2, 3, 4, 5 hours in, we still hadn't got to the crash site. And the people with me are completely breaking down. And the interesting part is in that moment, the girl's crying. The guy is praying out loud. He's like, I know you don't believe in God, man, but I'm freaking out and I'm praying for you. And, the crazy part for me is that the whole entire time, breaking down was never a thing. It was never an option, right? And I don't think that's a natural thing for me.
Right.
I think what happened is at that moment, I looked back on all of the training I had done up until then.
Right.
And I couldn't have been more appreciative for deciding to go down with a ship when I was in the pool. Right. I couldn't have been more appreciative for all of the times that I threw up on the front of my shirt from running too hard.
Right.
Because in that moment, in that adversity, which up until then was one of the strongest, adverse situations I had been in, for me, it was like you're solution oriented.
Right.
And I think that just came from, carving out all of those adverse situations through time. And to watch two people break down who hadn't been through the same thing that you had been in the past was just such a stark realization of like, oh, that's what people look like when they don't know how to deal with tough things. And you don't have to be in the military to see times like that.
Right.
Think about the hurricanes that we just went through.
Right. Or Vegas or any of the things that have happened in recent occurrences. And I think this is a perfect segue into the fact that this is one of the things I wanted to mention. You have a daily habit. I love this. You force yourself even to this day to face adversity daily.
Yeah, try to.
Yeah. Right. And I think, so that's, not everybody listening is, military or going to be in situations, like what you were in Africa, but you're right. Like, maybe they could be of service in, hurricane aid or what have you. But even if they just want to, increase mental or emotional resiliency or overcome, whatever, how do you give us some examples of how you face adversity daily and how listeners could maybe build that into their daily practice?
Yeah. So I think I got to preface that with saying, I think a lot of people in modern society, especially in Western culture, they mistake being comfortable for being happy. And those two things are not related. And I had to realize that. I used to work. So I've always run a company outside of the military for the last 5 or 6 years. And so I used to work on Coronado Island, and then I had my apartment downtown San Diego, and then I had my office in Mission Valley, 13 miles, the complete opposite direction of work. And the company started doing well, and I was doing well at work, and I bought a Mercedes, right? It was at that time the nicest thing I had ever owned. And at the same time, I had started thinking, I wonder what it'd be like if I could run to work, right? And I was not a runner, you have to preface that.
Right.
And, as with many things, the curiosity got the best of me. And so one day I did it, and I just decided to run to work. I had 4 or 5 hours before a meeting that we had, a team meeting. And it took me long. I mean, it was the slowest half marathon you could imagine. Hilly, hot, just covered in grime, cars going by, just exhaust, just a miserable time. I had to stop at Jack in the Box and eat a bunch of tacos because I was falling apart. It was awful. And I get to my office, and I'm cramping up, and I'm rolling out, and I'm talking to everybody in the team meeting. And they're like, "Why are you so goddamn happy right now?" And I'm like, it struck me right there. I'm like, the most comfortable, nicest thing I've ever owned in my life is sitting parked, and I drive it to this meeting every single day, 5 days a week, right? Mm-hmm. And it just struck me in that moment, the comfort that you have in life, it's only going to be happy to the amount of discomfort that you apply to your life, right? So, conversely, when I got in that Mercedes later on, it was the most comfortable ride. I appreciated that ride the rest of the week, you know? But I had to realize, so comfort and happiness are just not related. And so I'm constantly looking for ways that I can do that. And if it sounds crazy, usually, like I said, I'm probably going to try to take it on. I like the process of leveling up and just figuring that out about yourself. Mm-hmm. A lot of times I've run in one direction as far as I could. I think I've talked to you about this before, but I'll run or bike in one direction as absolute far as I can with no money. And I won't bring my phone. So there's it's Cortez, burn the ships. There's only forward. And so I'll run in one direction as far as I can. And then I'll get to the point where it's all right, man, well, get yourself out of this.
What's funny to me about that is I can see how get yourself out of this is sort of how you've been trained, but the whole put yourself in a situation, where, you leave without the phone, without the money, that is sort of anti everything that you've been trained to kind of always be prepared.
Sure.
But I get it. And, it's funny, you and I we went stand-up paddleboarding once this summer, and, I was proud of myself because that was about the farthest I had ever paddled.
Yeah.
And then the next day you're like, yeah, I'm going to paddle to work. I'm like, how far is that? And you're like, a couple miles. I'll probably leave at 2 or 3 in the morning because I have to be there by 6. Right. I'm like, well, shit, there goes my ego.
Well, I wasn't doing that to kill your ego.
No, I know you're not, but
I'm always curious.
Right.
I'm always I wonder if I can do that. And also too, I mean, I've just realized all of the great things that come by getting somewhere under your own power.
Yeah.
And so I'm always curious, I wonder if I can do that.
And a lot of this kind of is what your book is about, right? Let's talk about that a little bit. The book is Burn Your Couch.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It absolutely is. So, I mean, the biggest thing in the book is what I just said. I think most people in Western society, they mistake being comfortable for being happy. And I think it's manifesting with skyrocketing depression rates, obesity-related diseases. And I think a lot of us could kind of look at our evolutionary biology and realize we're kind of hardwired for human movement, human-powered movement.
So what's the biggest thing you've learned in writing the book?
Well, the writing process is hell. That's what I've learned.
Yeah.
I've been writing this book for 5 years. I think it's like most people that write a book. You write a book because you have to write a book,
Yeah.
Not because you want to. And that's how it's been for me. I wasn't naturally a writer. I have grown to love it, but it's taken a lot of work. But you know what I've realized? I've realized it through my ultras. I realized it through writing this book is that there's layers to this life, and the amount that you feel is directly related to how much you suffer for that thing. So let me give you an example. If you look at a picture of a painting of a nice sunset, you're going to think that's really nice, right? And you're going to think, especially if it's a good painting or it's a good picture with a really good lens and the guy knows what he's doing, and you can appreciate the magnitude of it to a certain degree, right?
Right.
Now, if you drive your car up to a bluff and you look at that exact same sunset, you're going to be a layer deeper. You're going to feel it a little bit deeper, right? Anyone that's ever stood on a bluff and taken a picture with their phone of a really cool sunset only to look at a lackluster picture, they know that, okay, there's no way to describe that, right?
Right.
Well, let me go a layer deeper. If you hike all night, right, you get up really early and you hike at 2 a.m. and you hike to the top of that same exact bluff and you get there really tired right as that exact same sun is coming up, and you look at it at that point where you got there under your own power, under your own movement, you've suffered for something beautiful. You're as deep into this life as you can go.
Right.
And I've just realized that's not, for me, that's the way that I like to look at things. I like to suffer, for lack of a better word, under my own power. But it's the same thing with the birth of a child. Anybody that's ever gone in pain for something beautiful knows that there's no way to recreate that. And so I've just realized, our time on this earth is so limited. I'm after as many of those experiences as I possibly can. Like, fuck the pictures, man.
Right.
I want a cool Instagram account just as much as the next guy, right? But at the same time, like, dude, if I felt it, I remember getting to the top of mile 155 with my girlfriend who was pacing me through the night. And we got up there right as the sun was setting. And we sat down, and I had passed out on that climb because of lack of oxygen in my brain, because I was deep in the pain cave. And I get to the top finally after it felt like all fucking night. I get to the top right as the sun is going down over the mountains and over the Lake Tahoe. Beautiful, beautiful landscape. And I'll post pictures of that. And I remember I'm sitting there eating this homemade brownie, just so happy that all I have left is 60 miles and I've gotten through the highest climb in the whole damn thing. And Julie's like, oh, you have to take a picture, babe. And I'm like, we don't. Like, I'm in it. This is as deep as it's going to get for me. We can take a picture and I'll never look at it again, because when you look at that picture, it's not going to be what it was.
Right. Yeah, the pictures can't do that justice.
Yeah.
How many miles did she do with you?
She did 35 miles with me.
That's amazing.
And she didn't train. She's an animal. She hiked.
It's over a marathon.
Yeah,
and it's
right.
not like a road race.
No, there was 80,000 feet of elevation change in this race. So 40,000 feet of climbing and 40,000 feet of descent.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and she went through the hard, and she is 100 times more brave than I'll ever be. But she is afraid of the woods at night. And she went through like 2 nights with me. And I'm hallucinating. I'm trying to keep it together for her sake. But yeah, to have her go through that with me was pretty cool. Pretty cool experience. Yeah.
Nice. So one of the things in the book that I want to get you to kind of highlight for our listeners, the bucket list blueprint.
That's right.
Talk about that a little bit.
So, like I mentioned, I signed up for that 100-miler because up until then I had done everything I had wanted to do without training, on a whim. A couple years previous, I did a 50-miler without training. It was just something I felt like I could do. Like, if I want to do something, I'll just do it. And I started to kind of develop that reputation, right? Like when you see someone does something cool on Facebook, like I'll be that guy that they tag. And I don't say that to brag. I say that because I don't think there's anything inherently special about me. If you look at any world-class athlete, entertainer, performer, there's a way to deconstruct what they do. And people like you, like Tim Ferriss, they've made a great living by deconstructing those things. And a lot of people are just content to stand on the sidelines wide-eyed and think that was amazing.
And that's the thing that fascinates me, is just looking at those people. There's nothing inherently different. We're all the same meat-covered skeleton with the same physiology, and the only difference is really what's between the ears.
Yeah, I think it's the biggest difference. Right. There's genetic potential. I think to play.
Well, yeah. To play in the NBA, you've got to have some different genes,
right. But the ceiling for what people are capable of is so much higher than where they're operating.
Right.
From 90% of people, including myself, a lot of the times.
Right.
So what the bucket list blueprint is it's I've stepped back and I've looked at, okay, what went right with my life and what's gone wrong, because that was super important. And I realized all of the stuff that went right, even if it seemed like I didn't train or I kind of did it on a whim, there was a method to the madness. There was a system. And when I didn't follow that system, I ended up failing.
Right.
So what the bucket list blueprint is it's just a way for someone to take a task, and I like to pick the bucket list because the bucket list is something that everybody picks. It stays comfortable in the future, right? It's something that they would love to do but probably never will. And they're like, oh, that's on my bucket list. I'm an advocate of just being, ripped out of comfort. I say find your bucket list and do every fucking thing on it, because a lot of people don't know where they want to go in life, but it's like once you start doing all these things that you think you love, you're going to realize some of them, I just like the idea of it.
Right.
And then some things you're going to be like, I love that. It aligned with me. And then you're going to step further in that direction. And just by doing that practice over and over, I think you're slowly going to figure out the things in life that you really want to be doing.
But essentially what you're doing is you're finding, all the things that you think you want to do, the ones that resonate, and then you do more of those. So essentially you spend more of your life doing more of what you love.
Exactly. And it's honestly, sometimes, you might get down a direction, and people, they love to put people in boxes, right?
Yeah.
Your friends, your friends and your family, they're concerned for you. They're not going to want you to be doing all this crazy stuff. Right? You just kind of got to let that go. Let go of what, I'd say pick happy over normal 10 times out of 10.
Right.
And so it's a relief to start knocking stuff off of your list, So when you start, here's how I do it. I start with the low risk probe. It's by far the most beneficial thing to my life. What is the lowest barrier to entry to that thing that you want to do? If you want to be a rock star, your low risk probe is playing your guitar in a bar at night on an open mic night, right? Mm-hmm. If you want to run a marathon, your low risk probe is a 5K. Figure out the minimum barrier to entry and just really reflect on that process. And if you liked it, and if you did, then step further in that direction. And if you didn't, get rid of it.
Yeah. Life's
too short to be doing dumb shit you don't want to do.
I love it. Yeah. So let's talk about, you figured out something that you really like, endurance events.
Yeah.
You've got a big project coming up. What can you tell us about beyond the book and how you're going to spend more time doing what you really love?
Yeah. So I think deep down, I'm a capitalist. I'm an entrepreneur. I love to create things. But I've realized that there's just something about the human condition that loves to help other human beings. And I don't know what that is. But getting out of the military at 30 years old, the last 10 years of my life have been filled with purpose, right? And so as I look to the next 30 years, I'm like, taking a job at Kinko's, for me, it's not going to be the thing. I'm going to hate my life and I'm going to regret my decision. I need something that has purpose. For me, I've just realized that helping other human beings, it feels like it fulfills that purpose. Now, like I mentioned with the Tahoe 200, I raised a bunch of money for the Heroes Project. I inventoried my skills, and one of the skills that I have is the ability to suffer for a really long time. And if I can do that and I can impact another group of human beings and do the most good in the world, well, I'm just not staying true to myself if I don't do that.
Right.
So the project that I'm going to be doing next, and all of the money from this book is actually going to go to the NPO, the nonprofit organization that I'm forming.
Wow.
But essentially, it will be centered around human-powered movement, and I will definitely be I'm going to launch a lot of human-powered expeditions in order to devote some money and awareness to charitable causes.
And most of those will be pediatrics, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
And for me, that's just, the most innocent. It's hard to describe, but I've spent a lot of time in medicine, and this might not come off as politically correct, but when you're in an emergency room and you step back and you look around, there's a lot of people that wind up in that situation because they haven't put their best foot forward in life.
Right.
They haven't taken care of themselves. And far be it for me to judge, but also far be it for me to want to help someone that doesn't want to help themselves.
Right.
And when you deal with the pediatric population, you just realize how innocent. And I've had all these amazing. They
haven't been given the opportunity to make that choice.
And everyone deserves that opportunity in my life.
Right.
Thanks for rescuing me there. And
we've had that conversation before.
That's right. Yeah. Right. And so I'm just I'm a strong believer in really wanting to do some good, and I have this ability, so why not?
I didn't realize that the book was going to fund the nonprofit. That's really cool.
It's going to be the first thing, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, after this race, because that motivator was so powerful,
Yeah.
I've realized, I'm not going to do another thing in this world that doesn't in some way dedicate some money or awareness toward something I believe in.
You told me right before we hit record that immediately following the Tahoe 200 that you were like, all right, I might be done. This might not be happening.
Yeah, I had some down days.
And then obviously, given the conversation we've just had, you had some of that reflection, some of that meditation, and clearly that's changed.
Yeah.
What were some of those light bulb moments?
That kind of got me back into it.
Yeah.
I woke up the next morning and I couldn't stand on my feet. So I had stress fractures in the bottoms of my feet. I lost a bunch of toenails. Skin was falling off my feet at half dollar size pieces. And I had to crawl downstairs. I managed to crawl and find a cookie. It was like the most happy I've been in a long time.
It's like the sunset. You had to walk up the mountain for the sunset.
Yeah, it really is.
Crawled for that cookie.
Yeah, perspective.
Was it a keto cookie?
Yeah, it was not. There's nothing keto about it. But I think for me that just had been the longest I'd ever suffered, and I never, there's people that run these on the regular, so I'm, like I said, nothing special, and I didn't post a time that was amazing. It just happened for me to be the most intense thing I've done up until then. And don't worry, I plan on leveling up from there. But right when it was over, I think I had never pushed pain off for that amount of time. Like I said, I couldn't sleep because every time I laid down, it felt like I was drowning. I was hallucinating every night. So when you're hallucinating because you haven't slept and then you can't sleep, you're just in this awful situation. And another thing I realized about putting pain off is that sometimes it comes back. And so I would push it off for hours and hours. And then every once in a while, it would just feel like I was in an engine room and alarms were going off everywhere. It was like ears were ringing and it would just all boil up and I would be getting rogue pains everywhere. And it was just a weird thing to try to deal with. Advil loses its ability after a while. Tylenol, caffeine stops working. And so you're just put in a situation where you're like really having to find the strength and the resolve to find like a positive mindset.
Right.
And I think when it was all over and being in pain the next day, I just had this moment like, oh God, was this worth it? And a buddy of mine, he called this type 2 fun. And it's something I think maybe a lot of your listeners can align themselves with. Fun, regular fun, everybody understands that.
Right.
Type 2 fun is that kind of thing where when you're in the middle of it, you ask yourself, why the hell am I doing this?
Yeah.
But then once it's over and you have them in it, you kind of like have like a little bit of a reflection and you have nostalgia about that. And
yeah.
Now all of a sudden you find yourself wanting to do the next thing.
Right.
So I had that moment right afterward where I was in so much pain that I was like, why did I do this? And then that pain went away and I realized I raised a lot of money for a cause I believed in, and I found the absolute potential of what my body was capable of in that moment, and I can't think of anything but doing it again now.
I like that. Type 2 fun.
Yeah, right?
Tell our listeners where they can get the book.
So if you go to burnyourcouch.com,
yeah.
I'm not sure when this is going to come out, but right now we have the pre-sale. You go in there, you just enter your email. When the book goes up for pre-sale, you'll just get a link sent to you and you can buy it. But the book will be on Amazon. My plan is in the coming months to release it as an ebook, hardcover book, as well as an audio book.
Okay. Are you going to record the audio yourself?
I am. Yep.
I think that's a wise move. No, I don't think anybody will be able to do that thing justice because it's your stories, it's your voice.
That's the thing. It's not. It's not because I like my voice. I don't. It's simply because
I hate listening to my voice too.
I hate it. But this book has meant so much to me for so long that it would be disingenuous to do it in any other way, I think.
Yeah. All right. And guys, remember, if you want to grab that book, we'll have a link to burnyourcouch.com on the show notes here, and that'll be naturalstacks.com/burnyourcouch. But remember, like Rick said, all the proceeds from this go to the nonprofit to help the Future Project and to help the charitable organizations. So that's a really cool thing. And that's a reason to just go buy the book in itself. But, also it'll help Rick and, help the projects there. So, and again, the video version for this, show notes, links, resources, all that stuff will be at naturalstacks.com/burnyourcouch. Go to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. Let us know how much you like the show. We will read your reviews on the air. When we do, we'll hook you up with a little Natural Stacks care package. I'm going to read one for you now from the best nickname ever, really.
Nice.
It's well played. So the best nickname ever, really. Email me, ryan@naturalstacks.com. We'll get you a care package. One of a kind, 5 stars, great podcast. I've learned so much from listening, much more than a typical podcast about health, covering a wide range of topics that are stuffed with useful info to further the understanding about the body and the world around us, but also providing actionable steps and tips to get the ball rolling to better health. Thanks, Ryan. Keep it up. So thank you for that. Thank you guys for listening. I really hope that this episode has resonated with you guys. If it has, please share it with people in your life that you know who will benefit from and enjoy this conversation, but also the things that we're talking about. Rick, before we let you go, question that every guest has to answer, your top 3 tips to live optimal.
I should have known this. I listen to your podcast all the time.
I can't tell you how many people listen to the show and then they come on and they're not ready for that question.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Take your time. It's not live. We can edit if we have to.
Top 3 things to live optimal. Mm-hmm. I think the first one is, in this, I've echoed this the whole entire conversation, but stop looking for ways out of adversity, right? That's going to be the first one in your life. Look for ways where you can build in, and it can start anywhere. My adversity and your adversity are not going to be the exact same thing. So, number one, figure that out.
While you think about 2 and 3,
I'm
going to put in a plug for you guys listening. Rick and I, because we're in the same geographical location, are going to record an episode in the future where we answer your questions while we sit in an ice bath. That may not be adversity for Rick, but...
No, I hate being cold.
I hate being cold too. I can do it for a short period of time, especially if there's a sauna or a hot shower nearby. But something tells me, so if you guys are not familiar with this concept, Mind Pump Media did a really cool episode where they did this as a Q&A. We're going to beat their time. I think the longest they lasted was like 7 minutes. We're going to last longer than that. And we're going to answer real questions, guys, not questions like Tupac or Biggie or what kind of car do you want to drive. So if you guys listening have questions, send them in, ryan@naturalstacks.com, post them on social media, whatever. We will be compiling a list, and Rick and I will be facing adversity and answering your questions on a future episode. So
I'm going to keep all of these mindset related.
Okay.
The second one, which I talked about, is develop a positive counterfact.
Yeah,
continuously.
I like that.
Every single time you find yourself in a situation that kind of sucks, figure out a way around it. Like, build that muscle. Because then when you need it, it'll be there. And I cannot echo that strong enough. So that is super important.
Do you have any actionable advice to be more aware of that in the moment? When what's a trigger that people can use to say, oh, this is one of those moments where I should do that, or even in a reflective state to say that was a learning experience or that was a moment where I could have used it?
Yeah, I don't know if there's for me, I'm not naturally solution oriented. So
really,
no, I'm not.
Okay.
Not naturally. Like if I get put in a difficult situation, I tend to start kind of spiraling a little bit.
And then you notice that.
That's right. And I notice the negative self-talk, and I think I would say I'm a dumbass or something like that, just kind of half jokingly, tongue in cheek. I'd be like, God, I'm a fucking idiot. And my girlfriend would be like, stop saying that to yourself. You're gonna start believing it.
Right.
And it was kind of a trigger for me. So the "this is good because" statement, that really has pulled me out of some.
So is that something that is sort of newer in your life and doesn't necessarily date back to your training?
Yeah, right. Very
really?
New.
Okay.
Very new.
Okay.
Like I said before, in training, I was the kind of guy, if I want something, I'll take it. Right? Okay. I'll run through a wall if it's in front of me.
But that only lasts so long.
That's right. And it only gets you to a certain point.
Right.
And I've had to evolve, and I've had to realize, no, you need to ebb and flow with the tide, right?
Right.
And that "this is good because" statement has really helped me do that. I mean, my car died a couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh, this is good because I'll get some extra miles in. And then I ran to work and I got a new battery.
There's something that makes that statement more poignant for you than for other people, that you don't just drive your car, you live in your car. Not only have you burned your couch, but you live in your car.
That's right.
By choice.
Yeah. You want to talk about why?
Yeah. Explain that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, people are always, everyone always has sympathy for me. They're always like, oh, I've got an extra room. I'm like, all right.
You don't just talk this stuff. You live it.
I do, yeah. For me, I like to create content. I've realized routine is a complete enemy of creation for me. I get really creative when I start taking the routine away from my life. Living in your car does that. And then the other thing it does, I looked around my house because I was getting ready to sell it, and I was thinking whether I wanted to move into a new apartment or what I wanted to do. And I started looking around, and I'm like, do I really need more stuff to walk past? Like, what is my goal in life? Is it to just accumulate as much shit as I can so that I can walk past a bunch of really cool stuff? Because that's all I do. 90% of the stuff in your house, most people, they just walk past it. So for me, I realized, like, maybe I could do without it. So this was a little experiment in trying that. There's no way when I move back to the West Coast, I'm going to convince my girlfriend to get in on that.
How long have you been doing the car experiment? It's a couple of months now, right?
Since June.
Yeah. Okay.
A few months.
Okay.
I love it. I'm not going to lie. On the weekends, if I want to go get some miles in, I'll cruise up to the Appalachian Trail, and I got my whole house there. Yep. All right. And so keeping a mindset-wise, the third thing and another thing I've kind of echoed throughout this entire conversation is, dude, live for reasons beyond yourself. Finding your why in life, it's daunting. And people, they shy away from it because it's daunting. All of the systems that we have in modern culture were not meant to help you find your individualism, right? Like school, for all of it, the good things it's done for a lot of people, it creates really obedient machines because society, in order to move forward, needs cogs, right? And so school trains you to be a cog in that machine. What's interesting is all of the people that somehow step outside of that machine, the Steve Jobs of the world, they're the ones that end up building the machine for everybody else to follow. Yeah. And so I really think that you need to spend a lot of time reflecting on your why in life, find some purpose behind what it is. Have that purpose not be so self-centered, and it'll get you through some really tough times. And honestly, you'll look back and you'll have done some really cool things.
I think that's a pretty good way to close this thing.
Cool.
Rick, this has been awesome. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. And you know what? I'm going to give you a copy of the book, and you can give it out to the listeners in any way you choose.
All right. We'll come up. Rick and I will brainstorm an idea, and I'll add that into the end of this thing for you guys, and we'll make it interesting.
Yeah.
How about
something cool?
How about adversity?
Yeah, let's make people do something.
Yeah. Well, we won't make you. We'll just say you have to post on social media the most whatever adversity you forced yourself to face.
Yeah, building adversity into your life.
Yeah, build adversity into your life, and we'll let Rick choose the one that he thinks is most worthy of a copy of the book.
Yeah, hashtag burn your couch, tag your Instagram, Ryan Muncie.
Ryan Muncie _ and Rick's is Run Lift Evolve.
Yep, run.lift.evolve, and then tag Natural Stacks.
Of course.
We'll give this thing away. Something cool.
All right. I can't wait to see what people do.
Me either.
All right. Thanks, Rick.
Perfect. Thanks.